Good morning, friends. Welcome to Wake Up in the Word for St. Patrick's Day 2025. Grab a good cup of coffee and join me in the Gospels. We're going to take a trek today and jump among three of them. Hey, let's get started in Matthew chapter 20, and we'll have a great day in the Lord. You'll notice for St. Patrick's Day, I'm trying to wear some green. Got the green light behind me with the green palm tree. I'm just kind of trying to go green today in the most positive way, of course. And as we get there, we're going to look today at a very interesting story of the healing of a blind man or blind men, and look at maybe some discrepancies and ask, should we be worried about this between three gospel writers? Hey, let's get started. Tell you what, before we do though, I want to mention both today and tomorrow, if you'd be praying for a dear friend, Pastor Todd Fletcher, Beulah Baptist Church, in the morning early will be going in for some very delicate spinal surgery at Spartanburg Regional Medical Center. Please be praying for this great man of God, his church, and his family as we are praying for a successful surgery and a healing for him so he can fully return to the ministry God's given him. Now let's pick up in the 20th chapter of Matthew first of all, and we'll start with verse 29, which is talking about the journey of Jesus and his disciples to Jerusalem. That's where they're headed for the Passover feast. But something else is happening. As they were leaving Jericho, Matthew says in verse 29, a large crowd followed him. There were two blind men sitting by the road. Well, when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." Now, here's what's interesting. These two blind men apparently are calling out. Is one or both of them calling out? It may be that one is the spokesperson for the two. Blind people used to hang out together because the camaraderie is kind of obvious. One can understand what the other is going through. So, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. This is what they picked as a description for how they wanted to describe Jesus. Now, why did they pick that phrase? Well, because the Messiah of the Old Testament, they knew their Old Testament, was described as being a descendant of David. They were recognizing his lordship. And in verse 31, it says, the crowd demanded that they keep quiet, but they cried out all the more. Think about this. The crowd saying, hush, I need to hear what Jesus is saying. Quit all this distraction. Quit screaming, okay? But they had a need, and they wanted to make sure that it was understood by Jesus that they wanted something. One of these men in particular is going to be talking to Jesus. Let's see what he says. Because they didn't hush when the crowd said hush. Instead, it says they cried out all the more, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." Well, in verse 32, Jesus stopped, called them, and said, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Lord," they said to him, "open our eyes." Moved with compassion, Jesus touched their eyes. Immediately they could see, and they followed him. All right, now Matthew's got this in the plural, that there were two blind men, and a miracle was performed for both of them. Now, watch what Mark says about this same incident. In verse 46 of chapter 10, in Mark's gospel, we read, "They came to Jericho. And as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a large crowd, Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the road." Now, here is Mark zeroing in on one of these people, perhaps because there was a connection Mark wanted to make, maybe to alert them to this particular person because people he was writing to knew him. We don't know the motivations, we don't know why, but obviously, if there were two blind men there, one of them has a particular connection we need to know about, then Mark says, hey, I want you to know one of those guys was Bartimaeus. So hang on, he's focusing on that, a blind beggar sitting by the road. And it says, Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Now, many warned him to keep quiet, but he was crying out all the more, "Have mercy on me, Son of David." So obviously from this description, we're talking about the same account, right? Well, Jesus stopped, and it says in verse 49, and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man and said to him, "Have courage, get up. He's calling for you." He threw off his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. And then Jesus answered him, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Rabboni," the blind man said to him, "I want to see." Well, Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has saved you." Immediately he could see and began to follow Jesus on the road. Now, does this mean there's a discrepancy from the 1 to the 2? No, I think the point is Mark zeroes in on one person who perhaps his readers would know and would recognize a name. Because, of course, after Jesus' death and resurrection, these same people were going around sharing their stories. So it may be that he's one of those that was known by some of those reading Mark's gospel, and he wanted to make the connections. But you know what? There's another discrepancy, or some would call it a discrepancy, we get to when we read Luke's account of this, because he seems to take it from another description. Remember, both of these gospel writers have said as he was leaving Jericho. Well, let's go over to Luke 18, verse 35, which says, as he approached Jericho. Wait a minute. Can't y'all get your story straight? Is he leaving Jericho or approaching Jericho? Hang on, I'll explain that one for you in just a minute. It says, as he approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the road begging. And hearing a crowd passing by, he inquired what was happening. Jesus of Nazareth is passing by, they told him. And all this is consistent with the other two accounts, right? Verse 38, so he called out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." There's this unique way of calling out for Jesus, recognizing he's the Messiah who would be a descendant of King David. Now, verse 39, then those in front of him told him to keep quiet, but he kept crying out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." All very consistent with the other two stories, right? Then in verse 40, Jesus stopped and commanded that he be brought to him. When he came closer, he asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Lord," he said, "I want to see." Sound familiar? That's the same thing we've read in Matthew and Mark. Verse 42, receive your sight, Jesus told him. Your faith has saved you. And instantly he could see, and he began to follow him, glorifying God. And all the people, when they saw it, gave praise to God. Now, is there a real problem? I mean, as you put the stories together, you don't have a problem with the consistency, except when you read that Matthew and Mark says as he's leaving Jericho, Luke says as he's coming to Jericho. Is this something we should be disturbed with? Well, not at all on its surface, because you know accounts are genuine when all of the minor details don't match. That means there's not been corroboration as these folks have gotten together, maybe before the police are going to interview them and said, hey, let's make sure we've got our story straight. Hey, that's corroboration. That's when you know when they're mimicking the same exact words. By the way, the same thing can be said as you've watched news accounts and folks in a major political party that seem to come up with the same catchphrases, and you can see almost as if they've been coached, and all of a sudden they're saying the same things over and over again. That's when you know there's something fishy going on. That's why when you look at things that might appear on the news and you notice the same catchphrase and the same talking points being used over and over and over again, sometimes the identical phrases, sometimes getting up and down, doing the same exact motions over and over again, you know something is wrong. Well, in this case, we know it's genuine because we do have some things that others might consider discrepancies. Well, what's the deal about Jericho? Here's something you need to know about the geographic situation that they were in the day. The city of Jericho is actually just 5 miles west of the Jordan River, about 15 miles northwest of Jerusalem. The old city of Jericho was destroyed. Remember when the walls came down? That's right. They didn't rebuild it on that exact site. Now, there were some folks still lived around those ruins, of course, and people visited it often, but it was never officially rebuilt as Jericho. A new city of Jericho was built to the south of the old city by Herod the Great. He actually had a summer palace down there. And this event that the three gospel writers record took place, most likely, somewhere between the old city and the new city of Jericho on the road from Jerusalem. That explains the diversity of their descriptions. By the testimony of all three men, it appears that the healing of Bartimaeus took place somewhere outside the new city of Jericho. That's why Luke says as he was coming in. They had already passed through the old city. That's why the other two gospel writers talk about as he was leaving the old city or leaving Jericho. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, this takes care of the story and helps you know it's valid. As the fact that there may have been two or more blind men only validates the fact that Jesus often healed many people, sometimes at once. But Mark wanted you to zero in on somebody that perhaps his readers would know about. A disciple named Bartimaeus, who probably, even when some of the first folks read this gospel, was probably still in a community of faith nearby, telling the story of how Jesus had healed him on the road. Well, that's all we're going to do today. Thank God for the stories and that there's nothing contradictory in all three of these. Instead, they all agree about Jesus, our Messiah, the Son of David, who is a man that healed. Well, God bless you. You have a great day, and the Lord have a happy St. Patrick's Day. I'll see you right here tomorrow when we wake up in God's Word.